I'm Andrea DelZotto. Welcome to Leadership Updates and Dialogues. Today we have a very special guest, Vincent Tong, Chief Development Officer at Toronto Community Housing. Welcome, Vincent.
Hi, Andrea.
Nice to have you here today. I know Toronto Community Housing is well known in our city. You are the largest landlord in Canada with 110,000 tenants, residents. You might correct my stats. You're also one of the largest social housing provider in Canada, and I found out you are the second largest in North America, which is quite a statistic. 2,100 buildings, 50 million square feet of residential space. I could go on, but I thought let's hear it best from you. Tell us a little bit about Toronto Community Housing, and we can talk about the mission, the vision, etc. And who better to hear it from? So I know it's early years. It was formed. Tell us when. It was an amalgamation, I believe, right? Amalgamation.
So TCHC was created by the City of Toronto on January 1st, 2002, and it was actually an amalgamation of several social housing providers at the provincial level and at the municipal level. So it was part of the provincial download of responsibility to the municipality. And so since TCHC was created, we've been working towards our vision of creating quality homes and vibrant communities where people are proud to live and work. Our mission is to build clean, safe, well-maintained, affordable homes for residents. You took a lot of.
I was just amazed when I dug a little bit deeper. So I think you're in 106 neighborhoods in Toronto, which is massive, and they're very diverse, which we'll talk about later. The residents.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so we have 60,000 units across our portfolio. We house 110,000 of the city's low and moderate income residents. 70% of our portfolio consists of 70% of the entire social housing stock in the City of Toronto, and 90% of our tenants are receiving rent gear to income subsidy with an average household income of about $15,000. And in terms of the development team, we're actually working on 8 communities right now. Regent Park, Lawrence Heights, Alexandra Park are the most well-known, the largest ones, and then we also have Allenbury Gardens, 250 Davenport, Don Somerville, Fir Grove, and of course Leslie Nymark.
Which also brings me to the fact that you are one of the largest real estate developers in Canada.
Yeah, I mean we're pretty active. We're fortunate enough to have a significant land holding.
Yeah, and you are the lead developer on those projects, which is quite interesting. And we'll talk about partnerships a bit later on. So you're, as Chief Development Officer, what's a day in the life of Vincent? What's it involve? It sounds like a huge responsibility with all the development that you just alluded to.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the day-to-day is focused on our revitalization initiative, and it's always been about city building. We're transforming areas of the city that have been largely isolated and disconnected for decades. We started revitalization as a way to leverage land value to generate revenue to address our growing capital repair backlog, which, right now we're estimating that by 2026, it's going to cost about $3 billion to bring our portfolio to a state of good repair. But we also identified an opportunity to reintegrate these communities with their surrounding neighborhoods. So it's now evolving. The city in 2017 kind of imagined how they fund TCHC, and largely that capital repair backlog has been addressed through city funding. And so now there's a real opportunity to kind of reimagine what the objective and purpose of revitalization is. And so, there's recently been a more renewed focus in the city to invest in more affordable housing. And so part of my role now is working with my colleagues at the City of Toronto, at Connectio, to identify more sites for affordable housing opportunities. And of course, one of our mantras about revitalization is that it's more than bricks and mortar. And so we have identified that while we're leveraging the land value to address some other financial aspects of TCHC and rebuilding the housing, there's also an opportunity to provide jobs, training, scholarships to tenants. And recently there's kind of been a growing movement around more community benefits. So it goes beyond the jobs and scholarships to providing spaces for tenants to gather. And for example, in Leslie Nymark, which we're partnered with Tridel on, we're building a commercial kitchen in the amenity room of the rental building. That'll provide residents with an opportunity to maybe start their own businesses or just even provide a space for tenants to use.
Right. There's a lot of innovation within Toronto community housing, that's for sure. In terms of inspiration, where do you look outside of Toronto that have some great examples of social housing?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question, and actually, I was fortunate enough actually to attend a housing forum hosted by the University of Calgary in 2019, and I met two amazing architects, actually, Paul Karakusevic and Christelle Avenier in France. And they mainly focus on social housing in Paul in the UK and Christelle in France, and they're doing some amazing work. But then, I also thinking, there's some great neighborhoods in Toronto that I also draw inspiration from. For example, St. Lawrence Market. It's a great model that I think revitalization strives to become, which is a good mix of, public housing, market housing, rental ownership, and just shops and amenities. So
yes, I think we are the mixed use capital of the world. That includes mixed income, and I think we're all learning the lesson. When you have homogeneous groups or environments, they're not the most successful. So it's worth looking at and intentionally creating communities that way.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've had the privilege of a long-standing relationship with Toronto Community Housing, as you mentioned, the revitalizations that are going on. We've been involved in 3. And let's talk a bit about the partnership and what has contributed to our success, in your opinion, to date.
What has contributed to our success? Well, I think just the fact that we've developed a really great working relationship between TCHC and Tridel. We started together in 2010. We partnered in the Leslie Nymark community, and then later on that same year, we then partnered with Tridel on Alexandra Park, and of course, we're now recently partnered with Tridel again on phases 4 and 5 of Regent Park, all through our RFP process. And I think, we've been able to, through our partnership, we've now achieved over, we will be rebuilding 1,160 RGI units together. 61 of them have been completed so far. We've also been able to connect 125 tenants to jobs, and we've handed out over $180,000 worth of scholarships and training opportunities. I think we've been fairly successful. Of course, there's a lot more work to be done and to continue.
Of course, there's more to come. And I'm sure, as with most long-standing partnerships and relationships, there's lessons learned along the way. So we're spotlighting all the good news and good, successes of our relationship, but as we build every building, for example, there's lessons learned, of course, and you do better the next time. So I'm sure from your perspective also, there's been learning along the way from both sides, actually.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've learned a lot in just the kind of, in our first phase of units that we delivered in Alexandra Park. And I think, early on, when we started Leslie Nymark, there was actually a movie that came out. There was a documentary on kind of the tenant experience going through a revitalization by Charles Officer called Unarmed Verses. And up until that point, we at TCHC and the Tridel team too, we thought that we were clear in our messaging, that we were communicating well with tenants. And I think, one of the learnings that, from my perspective, was after watching that documentary was just how much more work we needed to do to improve how we were communicating with residents and tenants and making sure that they understood what the process was and kind of what revitalization entailed.
I saw
and
the
another,
documentary. I saw it as well, and I
yeah,
know there were definitely aha moments where I know
sure.
the perspective was predominantly from one side, but it was clear areas of improvement and opportunity. And I think you're right. Communication is a huge one. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, and then I think the second lesson learned was about around the types of jobs that tenants were seeking. So, when we started Alex Park and Leslie Nymark with Tridel, we had only really kind of delivered on Regent Park up until that point, and we were very successful in delivering a lot of construction-related opportunities. And we thought that going into these communities, that tenants wanted the same type of opportunities, and we quickly realized that that wasn't the case, especially in Leslie Nymark. They were more interested in service-related jobs, and I think one of the great things about partnering with Tridel on the Leslie Nymark community was that Tridel's so large that it has so many different types of opportunities that it could provide.
Beyond construction per se, yeah.
Beyond construction, exactly. So we were able to connect residents to other opportunities that weren't directly related to construction.
And there's a broad range of skill sets in the residents at Toronto Community Housing, and a lot of qualifications that you might overlook. So I think you're right. There's a lot more opportunity to pair in different industries, and such as hospitality, etc., that they might be amenable to. In terms of picking a partner, the selection process, I know there's a very disciplined, I guess, RFP process, for example, but the qualifications that you're looking for in a partner, can you explain in a little bit of detail what those might be?
Yeah, I mean, revitalization projects are multi-year, projects, and they are, we have tenants living in the communities. That adds another layer of complication. So obviously, when we work with, when we issue RFPs and we're seeking out our partners, we're looking for developers that have the experience to take on such a large undertaking and complicated undertaking. We're also looking for socially minded development partners. So developer partners that aren't kind of focused only on kind of building a building and then moving on. It's really about building community.
Yeah, beyond the bricks and mortar, like you said.
Exactly. And that's what we found in terms of those developers that are the most successful through our RFP process are those developers that have that social-minded focus.
Right. Yeah, and you have to walk the talk, right? You can put it on paper, but you have to demonstrate that for sure. And the other part that's very unique about our partnership with Toronto Community Housing is that co-creating community-led design, and I think co-create is one of those very popular words and phrases that people might interpret differently. So when you think about community-led design, I've witnessed it firsthand, but for those that haven't, how would you best describe community-led design?
I would say that community-led design, it's just about working with residents in the community, making sure that their voices are heard, that there's consensus building, and that there is capacity building so that they actually understand, kind of the importance of having their voices heard at the table in terms of developing spaces, the unit layouts, kind of all aspects of a community design. Really, the people that are living in the community today know what's best for how the community should evolve.
Who else knows better than those that are living there? But it's got to be challenging to hear all those voices, and then I'm sure that it's not always unanimous decision making, but I guess a majority, and you have to meet the needs of the majority, I guess, the most, and use your. I know that each community is different, but like we talked about, the learnings that you capture from each community must come forward with you in your decision-making process and your design process, even though there's a unique aspect to every community that you're building. The community is very diverse. I would say from my own kind of research, I saw 38% children, 37% adults, 25% seniors, and there's a beauty in that diversity of the community. And I was wondering if you could also talk about that, some of the initiatives that you have you created in order to support these different cultures and communities. I know that you have, when you have communication, it's in multiple languages, right, to reflect the audience that you're reaching. And it's really, I guess, it's a skill and an art to meet the needs of all of those cultures. So can you speak a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are taken aback when they first attend one of our community meetings, and we have a number of translators in the room, and it's just constant chattering. You'll hear people translating in different languages. In Alex Park, for example, we have Vietnamese, Mandarin, Farsi, so we try really hard to make sure that we reach all residents in the community and make sure that they understand and are participating through the revitalization process.
Right.
I talked a bit about how TCHC, at least the development team, is now kind of there's an opportunity now because of the fact that revitalization is shifting, what our purpose is, and so with the death of George Floyd and the whole Black Lives Matter movement and confronting anti-Black racism, one thing that we're doing in the development team is kind of taking a look at how we can leverage real estate and development to address some of the systemic barriers that they've created for Black and Indigenous populations in the city of Toronto.
Yeah, it's like that famous quote, we shape our buildings and our buildings shape us. So you're creating more than a building. You're looking at all of those aspects of it. That's wonderful. You, the whole city experienced very challenging times over the pandemic, and which is over a year now. And anything that might be, worth mentioning in terms of Toronto community housing and how you supplemented the challenge, what the resources were or solved any of the challenges that might have arisen because of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think early on, one of the things that TCHC was really good at implementing right off the bat was enhanced cleaning protocols in our buildings. So we added additional shifts of cleaners to our buildings, just to make sure that high touch point areas were more frequently cleaned in our buildings. We also engaged in over 19,000 wellness checks by telephone and door knocking in mostly our seniors building, but also from those residents that have identified as having being vulnerable in our family portfolio as well. And through those calls, we identified about 1,100 residents that requested additional support. So that could have been from anything from getting their groceries delivered or accessing more healthcare supports. We also worked closely with Toronto Public Health to institute mobile testing in our buildings. So we got 36 clinics held in 16 of our TCHC communities. And also we worked, again, closely with the Shelter Support and Housing Administration at the City of Toronto to deploy their rapid rehousing initiative. So, they were looking to free up space in the shelter system to ensure that there was physical distancing and that that there wasn't any outbreaks of COVID within the shelters. So we provided housing to 400 people from those shelters in TCHC buildings, including some of our vacant units that we had just relocated residents out of in advance of revitalization. We did kind of a short-term housing opportunity where we could move people from the shelters into those units.
Right. That's it's definitely the shelters were challenged. Interestingly, you talked about the seniors, and I thought of the isolation and the loneliness that many of them felt during the pandemic. So it was interesting for me to learn recently that the City of Toronto, who is, I think wholly owns Toronto Community Housing, the sole shareholder, they did a pilot at Toronto Community Housing for the Connectio, which is to provide accessible, affordable internet to people, because that was really also an essential way for making sure that relationships were maintained and there was connections that could kind of mitigate the isolation and loneliness that was experienced during the pandemic.
Yeah, and I mean, We've partnered with Rogers Communication in the past to provide affordable internet packages to TCHC tenants, but you're right. Like we've now expanded that.
We say it's the number one amenity, right? Is your connectivity.
And yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know, how even, for example, doctors now, you access them virtually. So even just a simple, activity such as that, you need your internet. And right. So I think the city recognized that internet is a key component of living in today's age.
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely a catalyst to a more, I guess, flexible model for many services that we use daily. Sure. And let's focus a bit, just overall at a very high level. Some people will say social housing doesn't work. I think you and Toronto Community Housing is a testament to the fact that it does work. Some of our successful partnerships that we've delivered successfully, communities and residents that are thriving. And so how would you respond to that, to anyone who said social housing doesn't work and it's flawed? I mean, everything has areas of improvement for sure, but if you were to cite some examples that demonstrate it does work.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I would say I think social housing provides a need for those in the city and also for newcomers into the city. Both my grandparents actually lived in Toronto community housing buildings when they first immigrated here to Canada in the late 90s. And, looking back, that affordable housing provided them the opportunity to live independently. Until they couldn't, of course. And so I recognize the need that social housing provides to residents. And of course, through our revitalization model, we've talked a bit about the opportunities it provides in terms of jobs and scholarships. And, I've seen tenants that, start off kind of becoming an animator as a volunteer with the revitalization program, and they go on to get full-time paying jobs, and then they start their own families and they actually move out of TCHC housing and into their own housing. So I would say that
it's hard to deny the success when you look at those, especially those individual stories of success, which speak volumes. I think before everybody knew Tridel as a condominium developer, there was definitely development in when you said the amalgamation, Metro Toronto Housing. I know my father telling me stories about building for Metro Toronto Housing, which is, it goes way back and serves a definite need. And our country and our city is fueled on immigration, and there's a definite need for accommodations and shelter for those individuals that arrive here. So definitely, I think, worthwhile. And we can't lose sight of it when you think of a city that can't meet the needs of newcomers and people that are just, housing ownership is not within reach. These are really an essential part of our city and making it successful and complete. If you were to talk about any challenges, I know you talked about some of the observations from the documentary, but challenges you face with revitalizations, what will be top of mind? Because it's got to be a very challenging process, especially when you said people are living there, right? Those are people's lives that are being disrupted in some way. So to build a new development on a vacant piece of land is challenging enough, but when you've got many people already there, is that one of the challenges?
Yeah, I think it's just the number of competing interests that revitalization needs to speak to. You highlighted one, which are the residents that are living in the community today, and making sure that we minimize as much disruption as possible to them, and make sure that we're supporting them through the process of having to move out of their homes temporarily. And of course, I highlighted, of course, addressing anti-Black and Indigenous racism through zoning and land use planning, which has historically kind of marginalized those groups, and funding. Right. As the city, ramps up its need for more affordable housing, residents are, looking for more job opportunities, more community economic development, more spaces for residents. The revitalizations that we've initiated today are going to get a little bit more challenging because they're going to be in less desirable locations that can't leverage real estate like the ones that we've already implemented. So funding is going to be definitely a challenge moving forward.
Right. It's interesting when you talked about the anti-Black racism. Our city is so diverse, and I heard recently we're so diverse, but we're not necessarily inclusive. So you would assume a city like ours has that with all our diversity, but no, we're still working on it. So it's yeah. Well,
yeah. I mean, 40%. So 60% of TCHC residents identify as racialized. We're still working to kind of pinpoint that down further and get more detailed race data. But, you know, when you look at it compared to the city as a whole, which is about 50% as racialized, you know, so there's a larger population of racialized residents living in TCHC communities today.
Right. And I think your organization and your composition of employees and staff also reflects the diversity tremendously, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're a very diverse organization, but of course, we can always do better.
Right. It's like you said, who better knows the needs of the community than those living there? But also, if the developer is reflecting the diversity of the residents that you're building for, it's also you know an advantage, a true advantage. I know that it's becoming top of mind for a lot of people. I've even heard of developers going in for financing and turned away, saying, when your team reflects more the community you're building for, come back, right? Because those days are a little bit behind us now, fortunately. Thank you so much for being here today, Vincent. We really enjoyed talking to you, talking about revitalizations, really community building and co-creating, and all the real wisdom that we've learned from Toronto Community Housing and our partnerships. Thank you for spending time with us today to talk a little more about those.
No, thanks. It was great talking to you. And of course, we value our partnership with Tridel, and we look forward to continuing on that partnership.
Likewise. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. Join us next time for more dialogue and insights, and have a great day.